About 2 weeks ago, Jamie talked to me and she shared her heart with me concerning this group and concerning the vision that she had for it. And so I would like her to talk about that now.
Okay. So I work with youth. That's what my job entails. And recently, a few youth that I work with have been interacting with me and you, and they see the level of relationship that we have. And they've come to me and they're like, well, how do I get that kind of a relationship? And so I've really been talking about relationships a lot and just kind of guiding these youth. Um, and at the same time, I've had several adults come to me and just telling me that their marriages are not very good and they're on the brink of divorce or whatever, and just come to me for advice. How did you go from where you were to where you are now?
Yeah. How did you go from where you were to where you are now?
A lot of work. A lot of work. So when I met my ex, I just was at a really low place. I had no self-esteem, no self-worth. I had no confidence in myself. And so when I met him, I'm like, yep, he's the best I'm going to do. So I just went for it because I didn't think I could, or that I deserved any better than that. And so we just had a really horrible, dysfunctional relationship. I mean, sure, there were good times, but for the most part, it just was really dysfunctional. A lot of fighting, and it wasn't a very good relationship. And I just kind of lived that way for a long time because I had no self-confidence or self-worth.
Right. What were some of the steps that you took to get out of that relationship?
So it was a really long process. It was almost 3 years, maybe 4 years, that I really worked on myself. I went to counseling, and I just took that time for myself. I had left my ex previous times, but I still was in that place where I had no confidence, no self-esteem, so I would go back. And being a single mom, 4 kids, it's hard to do when I hadn't worked for many, many years.
Right.
And I just didn't have the means to support us. So it was just a long process of counseling, working on myself. And in that process, I don't want to say I'm better than anyone, but I kind of noticed that I was improving upon myself and becoming a better person. And my ex was just kind of staying the same.
Yeah. Is that the kind of point where you realize that you're going 2 separate directions?
Yes. Yeah, because, I looked at the work I was doing and he didn't understand it. And it is very, very difficult at times, very difficult emotionally. And he just didn't get it. And so I never had relief from that. But even outside of my work, we just were completely different people. We had different desires in life.
Right.
And so I just realized, I don't want to say I'm above anyone, but it's like I was up here and he was here.
Right.
There was just a huge gap between us.
Yeah. For me, it seems kind of like you're traveling down the road and then all of a sudden there's a fork in the road and then you just kind of both split and you're walking 2 different directions and you look around and you're not even walking with them anymore.
Oh, I like that. I love that analogy. I totally get that, yeah. So what about your relationship? I know you've been through a lot.
Yeah, I had 10 years of pretty good, but it started to go south. I think the main thing that was with it was just being codependent and being an enabler. She had addiction problems, and I took on the role of a father and an enabler, and not a husband. Basically, what my life consisted of was hiding the keys and taking the money out of the bank account and just trying to make sure that she didn't do nothing stupid.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what did that do for you and your self-esteem?
It tore it up. It tore it up. It really did. One of the reasons is because I'm not ignorant. I know I'm fully aware of, codependency and all that stuff. But if you're going to be in that environment, then that's what you're going to become. And there's no choice about it. The only thing you have left to do is to get out of the environment, because you're being forced into a role, that you don't want. So as far as self-esteem, I felt that I felt really discouraged, and I didn't like myself very much, just because I felt a little bit like a doormat, like I was being walked on and stuff. So
yeah. So it sounds like you got to a point where you knew it was time to get out. What did you do to get out?
right, yeah, there was a point that where kind of like Popeye, this is all I can stand, and I can't stand anymore. So yes, I did have that moment, and then a little bit before that moment, I just began to envision my life without her, kind of knowing that it was going to lead that way. And so that gave me maybe some mental clarity to actually see my life with different than what I was living, because it was highly dysfunctional. And so I began to see myself different, and so there just came a straw that broke the camel back scenario, and then I just asked her to leave and not to come back.
Yeah. So it's completely different for men and women. Like when a woman leaves, if you've been a stay-at-home mom, it's really difficult because now you have kids to support. You have to support yourself. And a lot of times, like for me, I hadn't worked for many, many years. And so
Right.
I would have to go out and get a minimum wage paying job. And that wouldn't support me. But for a man, typically you're the provider. So you don't have that aspect of it. So how was it for you getting out?
It was kind of like a circus act. It's kind of like the dude standing on the unicycle, and he's juggling, and he's got something fire surrounding him, and it's chaotic, and it's like trying to keep everything rolling and keep everything up in the air by yourself. This is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
But you gotta still go to work and still do these things. You gotta provide for a child, pick them up from school and take them to school, and all those different scenarios where life becomes really tough.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
So in this time, so you had your time to work on yourself. I had my time to work on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So when we met, we were both at a really good place personally.
Yes.
So I have a question for you.
Yes, my dear.
What attracted you to me?
Beyond looks, it was, sitting down and talking with you, and feeling like you had your shit together, that you were independent, in a sense, didn't need rescuing. You didn't have I need a man syndrome to feel complete. And so I think the core of all that was like, yeah, this is the one for me, because it's what I really need in my life.
Yeah. And you're right, that not needing a man syndrome. Like I remember our first date, you almost didn't show up.
I did.
And I actually had this
I almost
attitude.
flaked out.
I had the attitude of like, fuck it. I don't need a man.
She changed the plans on me.
I
And I was
did.
like, I don't really feel like coming now.
Yes, work was crazy. And
Yeah, she didn't care.
yeah, and I
Which is
really
cool.
didn't. I think I had worked, I don't even remember. It was like, we finally met up at like 7 or 8 that night. And
Mhm.
I think I started work about 8 that morning. So I had a really long day. I was tired and I didn't care.
Yeah, she didn't care.
Yeah, I didn't need a man. I'm definitely glad that you made the date.
Well, I picked up on it. I picked up that you didn't need a man. I'm like, she gonna get a man. She don't need a man. She gonna get a man.
Oh, I love it. But I think the thing that attracted me to you the most was, before we went on our first date, we had many, many phone calls.
Yes.
Probably a couple a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I just loved your thinking. I loved your mind. I loved your values and your beliefs. And I just fell in love with that. You know, I mean, first time I saw you, I'm like, holy shit, he's freaking hot. But you know, looks
thank
can only
you.
last for so long, and there has to be more to a relationship than looks.
Right.
And for me, it was, you know, even now, you know, as attracted to you physically as I am, it's more mental for me that I'm like so attracted to you.
Right.
Yeah.
You talking about like there's more to a relationship. What do you think? You know, the strong points in a relationship are?
For me, the strong point is communication. We communicate the same way, and we're just like on the same wavelength, and so it makes communication super easy. You're really easy to be vulnerable with.
Right.
Even the times that I'm like, I just want to tell you something that I've never told anyone else before, which I've had many of those moments. It's really easy to do. It might take me a moment, but it's like super easy to do because our communication is super, super strong.
Right.
What about you?
You know, I think that for me, it's you just being everything that I need at the moment that I need it. And so if I've had a hard day, or if I'm carrying stress, if I'm discouraged, or if I'm frustrated, whatever, you know, life throws at us, and it does throw it at us, you know how to be the answer. And I haven't always had that. You know, I've had, you know, where I'm feeling escalated or I'm feeling frustrated, and my partner will escalate me even farther, and not bring, you know, any sort of comfort. So I think one of the strongest points for me is that you are just what I need at the moment that I need it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
it is. You know, and I've noticed that, like from the beginning of our relationship, I would see that in you, but I didn't know what you needed, so I didn't know how to give it. And so I just kind of went to a place where I did what I thought you might like, and that was, you know, maybe it was touch or a hug or just laying there with you. And as our relationship has progressed, I can very quickly pick up on those moments now. Before it could be an hour. Now it might be 5 minutes. And I'm like, okay, something's wrong. And I know exactly how to help you.
Right.
I think the last time it took me about 5 minutes to realize that you were really frustrated. And I just laid there and just held you for a while, and I think it took maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That same scenario would go into maybe a 24-hour tailspin. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be frustrated and be like, what the hell are you frustrated for? Why are you acting stupid? This and that, and it would leave. You know, I'm just grab my car keys and I'm just gonna leave and go sleep in my car for the night, and maybe talk tomorrow, maybe not. So, just that one little scenario of just like being discouraged or frustrated can lead. You know, my previous pattern was, you know, a day of frustration where you just kind of just break all that up. It's not even existent. So
Yeah, we do have a pretty epic relationship, don't we?
it's awesome. So if there was, you know, 17, 21-year-old, whatever, who's contemplating getting, you know, in a serious relationship, what would you say to that person?
I would honestly tell them to make sure that they're at one with themselves first. Because if you're not good with yourself, you'll have nothing to give anyone else. So you really need to make sure that your self-worth is there, your confidence is there, and that you know you're worth it. Like you're
Right.
worth having a good relationship. We both know what it's like to have really bad relationships, and we also know how to have a really good relationship that's really strong. And so I would tell them, you know, just make sure you're good with yourself first. Take that
Right.
time. You know, at 20 years old, you might have 60, 80 years left in your life. You know, take a couple years and really work on yourself and dig deep and
Right.
just work out all your shit.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
I think that's really good advice because, you know, the core of our being, like attracts like, and if we are, you know, beaten down and depressed, and our self-worth is low, then we're going to attract that same person. But on the flip side, if, you know, we've taken care of ourselves and we're strong and we know our identity and we know our worth and all those things, then we're going to attract that same kind of person. Mm-hmm. So I think you hit the nail on the head as far as, you know, be healthy first.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this before, you know. It's like it would have been great had we met, you know, 10 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever. But we wouldn't have the relationship that we do now because we wouldn't be the same people. You know, it wouldn't have worked out.
Right.
So it's super important to be good with yourself. That way you can have your Tim. That's what all the girls call him. But I want my Tim. It's cute.
You're funny. I really don't have anything else. Do you?
No, I think I'm good. I'm going to have a lot more to talk about, but this video might be getting kind of long, so we'll save it for other videos.
All right. Peace.
You're so cute.